Welcome to Exegetical Tools Basic Greek videos. In this video we're going to look at the imperfect middle passive indicative, and this is assuming that you're already familiar with or you've watched the video on the imperfect active indicative. I'm going to assume the information from that video here so I don't have to repeat it. So if you need to, you can go back and watch that video again, or you can look it up in your grammar and review the imperfect active indicative. So you'll see here that this is really very similar. Really the only difference is we're using a different set of endings. So you can see you still have the augment, the epsilon augment, and all the same rules for the augment apply, all the lengthening and the rules with diphthongs and those sorts of things. We still have the present tense stem, so in this case lu. We still have the omicron epsilon variable connecting vowel. It's just that we have these different endings, the secondary middle passive personal endings. Remember, we're still in the indicative mood. It describes something factual, asks a question, or states an opinion. We're still in the imperfective aspect, so that means we're portraying the action as if it were unfolding before you, or it's an internal viewpoint to the action. Remember, like you're standing on the sideline of a parade, seeing it, you're in the midst of the action. We're also still using that augment, as we said, and it generally indicates past time, as we talked about, but not always. So if you need to review the rules on the augment, go back to the imperfect active indicative. Now let's look at the paradigm. As you can see, everything's the same except for the personal endings and the translation. So now these personal endings, you'll remember, and we talked about in the imperfect active indicative video, that there are 4 sets of endings. There's the primary active, there's the secondary active, there's the primary passive, you say middle or passive. Some people call that primary B, and then there's the secondary middle passive. Some people call that secondary B. Some grammars they say active and middle passive, whereas other grammars will say A and B. But remember that the primary endings, personal endings, correspond to tense forms that are more generally aligned with present tense time, future tense time, whereas the secondary endings are more aligned with tense forms that tend to be more past oriented. It's not one-to-one correspondence, but that's just a general guideline. So in this case we have the secondary middle passive endings because we're in the imperfect tense form. So it's going to get the secondary primary endings. And this is the imperfect middle passive, so we get the middle passive forms. So remember the present active, if we go through these real quick, o, ace, a, omen, ete, usi, with the connecting vowel. And then with the connecting vowel for the secondary active, on, es, e, omen, ete, on. The present middle passive, primary middle passive, being my, psi, tai, methus, they, ontai, and remember the psi generally contracts to an eta with an iota subscript. And now here we are at the secondary middle passive endings, and here they are. So you could memorize them as main, so, to, methus, they, onto, and in fact that's how they actually are over here. Main, so, to, methus, they, onto. However, notice that the secondary singular form, just like psi in the primary middle passive, it's going to contract as well because that sigma just causes problems. Whenever you have sigma beginning a personal ending, it's usually going to cause some sort of issue. If you look down here, this is what happens. You end up getting to eluu rather than elaso. So eluaso would be the form. As you can see, you have the augment, the stem, and then the connecting vowel, and then you'd have the ending. However, this sigma right here does not like to hang out between 2 vowels when it's part of an ending, so it's just going to drop out, and that leaves you with elueo. But that's 3 vowels all together jumbled up, and it doesn't like that. So it does this contraction, this eo on the end right here, this is going to contract to u. So you're going to end up with eluu. So the epsilon omicron changes or contracts into the omicron upsilon. It's a very common contraction that occurs a lot. So that's the only odd thing about this paradigm, and the only thing you need to really be concerned about. Now, as far as the final forms, we can pronounce these: eluamein, eluu, eluato, eluametha, elueste, eluanto. And you can see the translation here is I was being loosed, you were being loosed. So we're saying being loosed to capture the passive sense, the passive sense of the verb. So it's not that I was loosing actively, but it's passively I was being loosed by someone else. Or it could be a middle translation as well. I've really only done the passive translation here because the passive is probably usually more common than the middle. The middle could be something like I was loosing for myself, or simply I was loosing, or you'd have to look up the middle. If you have a middle form, you'll need to look it up in a lexicon to see what the middle form actually means. Because sometimes the middle form can just have a sense of reflexicity, or perhaps of self-interest, or being able to do the action of its own accord. But in other cases, the middle form will just be a different meaning altogether. So you can look up the verb arco, for example, arco versus archomai, and you can see the difference in meaning there. So I was being loosed is simply the passive translation, and the being, rather than I put I was being loosed rather than I was loosed, because I'm trying to capture that imperfective aspect of being in the midst of the action. So if I say I was being loosed, I'm presenting it as if it's going on right before your eyes. I was being loosed and I was untying the knot, and the knot was being untied, and then I was being set free. It's almost like I'm telling the story as if it's happening before you. So there are some words where it won't really allow that, what we might call in English a progressive translation. A lot of verbs won't really allow you, like I was knowing, for instance. The verb to know doesn't translate very well into imperfective aspects. It's more of a state. You know something or you don't. You can't usually translate it I was knowing something. You just say I knew X. So you have to watch out. Translation of verbs, this is a very complex subject and something we can't capture in these basic grammar videos. However, if you want to check out more, you should check out the verbal aspect annotated bibliography on our website and find some of the reading there, and get involved. You can find further information on translation there. So that's it for the imperfect middle and middle passive indicative. I hope this was helpful, and hope to see you back next video.